Welcome to the final episode of A Pessimistic View of Human Life and Happiness, looking at Rodin's thinker. Of course, we've gone through the Great Gamble Theory, and this is the final episode of that. Now, I just want to round up by giving a blueprint on the next frontier. What should we actually expect? Because when you look at all these things we've talked about, you would think maybe there's no solution. Maybe human beings should just continue to ride, the wind, and just wherever it ends up, fine. And actually, that is what it looks like, because we are all trapped in our different worldviews, our different little boxes, whether it be Christianity, whatever tribe we belong to, whatever nation we belong to, and all that. And so you wonder, is it really worth it to try something, try to visualize an end and to work towards that end? I believe it is. I believe it is. Because that is the purpose of we being human, as different from being animals that don't care about that. The definition of being human is to worry about those things, to wonder about those things, and to try to live a better life. Like I talked about in the last episode, our physiology is built for that. The combination of our intelligence and physiology is built to be able to create a world as better than the natural world that we have met here. So this is just why I'm going to go ahead to try and propose a path that through which we can get where we want to get. These are not new things. These are things that are already in place. But I want to try to kind of put it, systematize it a bit so that we can really see if this is possible. And it doesn't matter whether Jesus is coming back, or not. It doesn't matter whether you believe that or not. It is something worth looking at. So number one on my list is that leadership starts by example. And this leadership by example is historical. Of course, this leadership started historically in the Middle East and moved on to Europe. But at this time in history, Europe and America are at the forefront of global leadership. And so they have to set the pace by example. And in my own view, number one is to reduce interference in other countries, especially in imposing cultural beliefs. Historically, any nation that wants to rule or lead at the world stage will start from the cultural point of view, because the cultural point of view affects the moral way of life. And because of that, of course, that is the first point at which every leader nation or conquering nation historically would start from. One story that comes to mind, though, is the story of Nebuchadnezzar, the one I looked at from Jeremiah chapter 34. He was the first leader in the world to stop ethnic cleansing. One of the first leaders in the world to stop ethnic cleansing. He chose rather ethnic assimilation and ethnic integration. And he did that by picking from the best, the princes of every land he conquered, and he imbibed them or assimilated them into his group of wise men, and they became his top advisors. And this is what started the New World Order from that very point. Babylon started it in Babel. It took about 1,000 years before they were able to re-engage that again through Nebuchadnezzar. And when the Greeks came, they inherited that. And they copied it. Okay? They copied it. Assimilating the different ways of life of different cultures and peoples, and trying to create a hybrid, a better way of life. And so this is what is at stake now. This is what has created Western civilization, and it is what has created America. And America prides itself in this very philosophy today. Integration of various races and peoples. Okay? So this is very important that we must understand. And because of this, it is important, they have already learned it, especially the United States, not to interfere excessively in the cultures of people. But recently, of course, we see a greater amount of this interference, because every civilization gets to a point where it believes that it is now the superior civilization. And because it believes this, it believes it has the right to impose its own views and ways of life on other people. And of course, yes, within themselves, they have argued among themselves. I know that this is not ideal, but there's that irresistible desire to still do this. We will still look at this after the short break. So, the desire to impose one's views on others, it is very right. And especially if you are more successful, than that person, you think that person is inferior. And of course, it is something now in Western civilization. You have the biggest bank account, of course. You are the person who would lead the way. But like I pointed out some episodes back, this is not necessarily so. Especially now that we are discovering people like the Epsteins, people like Weinstein, people like so many others that have been caught making money the wrong way. And so because of this, in fact, it's not something we don't have to catch anybody. It is historically known that the rich get to that point many times the wrong way. One example I can point to is the biblical narrative. Okay, when Jesus said, if you want to enter the kingdom of God, a rich man cannot enter the kingdom of God. It is harder, it is easier, for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. What was he saying? That was the status quo in his time. Rich people made their money through human trafficking, through killing and warfare. So it was known that the rich were wicked. They were the scum of society, and this is the true situation of it. After Christianity took over, now listen to me very carefully. After Christianity took over and established the kingdom of heaven, based on the 10 Commandments, based on Christ's leadership of love your neighbor as you love yourself, now a system was established where the rich in society now became the most noble, the most moral, ethical people, and because of that, now it is assumed, of course, that if you should listen to anybody, it should be the rich. Okay, but of course, we know that it is still not perfected. Christianity has gone through its own failures, and we live today in a we are no longer in the church age. Okay, post-Christian age, and of course, most of those things have returned. Islam tried to re-engage that system through a worldwide jihad. Of course, it failed, and we still know that today the Middle East is the most conflict-ridden region in the world because of the failure of Islam and its effort to re-engage such leadership. Now, so we're living in a world, post-Christian world, post-Islamic world, okay? We're living in a world now that is led by the Renaissance, okay? Where science has come of age, and is trying to take over. And so, part of this science is the science of assimilation, of what? Integration of all cultures, all beliefs, all races. And in that, there is a kind of a care not to impose one's culture on another person. And I believe that Europe and America will do well to go back to that carefulness. But this is very important. You have to be careful to try not to overly impose yourself on others just because you are the leader. Okay? Now, in the area of human rights abuses, this is the area where Europe and America have really succeeded. Of course, I was listening to a fellow Nigerian a week ago, and he was saying that he has studied this, and he discovered that even the efforts of Europe to colonize instead of to enslave was merely for economic purposes, okay? Some form of indirect slavery, as it were. And of course, we must take that into consideration, but also admit that this is the area of human rights is the area the Western world has succeeded most in when it comes to interfering in other nations' culture and religions, okay, and civilizations. Okay, Britain and the United States have interfered, were able to stop the slave trade after stopping it in their own countries. Yes. Then subsequently came and stopped the slave trade here in Africa and other developing countries, and after this went on a continuous campaign of introducing democracy and promoting human rights. And so we must give them credit for this. And this is the only area where they might still succeed if they continue. Not being the police, as it were, but rather campaigning against it through trade embargoes. Of course, some of these countries still trade with countries that brutally enslave their people. This is not, of course, does not help, because when you preach something and you do not do it yourself, it does not help. Okay? So, and then, of course, those who seek asylum. I have really studied this area of migration over the past 5 years, not because I wanted to, but I was looking to go and study somewhere overseas, and I was able to really study what was going on, and I discovered something, that these Western nations are not engaged in helping the poor and the oppressed anymore. They are rather engaged in trade. Okay, that means the richer person, if you can afford to study overseas, if you can afford to work overseas, then you work overseas. But the poor and the oppressed in these other nations can only board boats, of course, illegally get into these countries. Okay, and in that light, the West is not involved in helping the poor in these countries. They give maybe about 1% of their yearly income as aid, but this is a drop in the ocean, okay, compared to the budgets of these countries. In fact, the total aid given by the West to Nigeria, I think the United States, is just about 1.8%, okay, of the total budget of Nigeria. So this is a drop in the ocean. About the same thing they give to the to space exploration, I might add. You know, but it's a drop in the ocean as compared to what is needed. Of course, we are grateful. The African nations should be grateful, but of course, others will argue that based on what the West has benefited from colonialism and pre-colonialism, this is not a figure at all. And so this is an issue, okay? But so trade embargoes should be placed on nations that clearly abuse human rights, especially basic human rights like the right to life, the right to education, the right to healthcare, okay, the right to a habitation and work, basic ones that are agreed about globally. So this is an issue that we must look at if we are looking at the role of Europe and America. More after this. Yes. In this light, part of the process of ensuring that human rights are protected, okay, is by ensuring trade parity and fair play. The lack of trade parity and fair play is one of the reasons why even in the immigration process, the West is not catering for the poor at all and the oppressed at all. Instead, it is the rich who are most likely responsible for the oppression in these third world countries that get to go to those countries, okay, and still get to benefit from asylum and those things that are supposed to help those who are oppressed, okay. And I also add that over the years I have looked at and I've studied this issue, I discovered that the efforts of the West to help the poor in these countries are often half-baked. Most of what they do is that they come into third world countries and they look at those rural dwellers, okay, people who may not be able to speak English very well, who may not have access to education, and they say, okay, these are the oppressed, okay. And what they have created is that they've created a neo-colonial. Okay, this is the same thing that a lot of analysts complained about in Rwanda, okay, and they created a neo-colonial, and because they created a neo-colonial, which was in the case of Rwanda actually the pre-colonial rulers of the land created a genocide, okay, because the majority rose up against the minority. So in anywhere they do what they do, they create the same system, okay, whether they have actually targeted the oppressed to emancipate or not, you know, the ripple effect is counterproductive, okay. So this is just what I have noticed, and in this very dispensation where fair trade is important, you find that there is a lot of emphasis on the wealthy, and of course the real oppressed and the poor are never really catered for, okay. So it is important to reform the asylum system. If they want to stop it altogether, it is their business. But if they are still doing that, they must concentrate on the oppressed, people who are truly oppressed, people who are truly seeking help, and not on the rich. Okay? So this is the role of Europe and America. Of course, they will want skilled people to come into their countries. Yes. But will any oppressed person really be skilled? I don't know. And I've discovered that many people who are really skilled and cannot get jobs will not even have the money to pay for those asylum fees or whatever, you know, work permits. So this is very important. Finally, Europe and America will do very well to prohibit conflict peddling, okay, to prohibit conflict peddling and the proliferation of Western mercenary groups operating in lesser developed countries. This is the biggest problem that we face, whether the activities of the deep state or activities of paid mercenaries, that instigate wars because of conflict minerals or otherwise, this is something that the Western nations must look at. Invading any country, invading countries does not necessarily stop them from oppressing themselves. It might just create more oppression, especially in this time when modern warfare is available to a lot of these countries. Okay, in the colonial times, of course, many of these countries didn't have modern weapons, and it was easier, of course, to come in and emancipate whoever it was that needed emancipation. But right now, modern warfare is available to all these countries, and that is why we can see the bloody nature of the warfare that is going on in Ukraine, in Israel, in Sudan. They are very protracted. In Somalia, they are so protracted. Why? Because these modern weapons are available. And so the Western government should help to prohibit conflict peddling. Okay? We will look at more after this time. Now, number 2, I've just looked at leadership role of Europe and America. Now I'll look at Russia and China. Okay? Russia, of course, formerly known as the USSR, a massive country, has been really, it's a funny country really, because you have to understand its antecedents. It's a country that many people do not study because of its policy of really being to itself. Okay, it's very conservative, protectionist nation, and of course, in recent times, part of the world has shifted towards Russia because of this shared principle of non-interference in the affairs of other countries, and Russia does well in that, although it does interfere, but not to the extent of imposing its own culture on others. And so it's a country that we must look at very carefully to understand and to really know where the world is going to go. Russia, though a conservative country, is one of the more advanced nations of the world, especially in the area of space technology and in infrastructural development. Okay, China too has caught up, vis-a-vis the influence of countries like Japan, and these two countries, Russia and China, are very important in the scheme of things. And these two countries, in my view, must begin immediately to develop a clear foreign policy of tolerance and international cooperation with Western and all other nations. If they become warmongering countries, it's not going to end well. It took China and Russia to partner with the US and with Britain, to end the Second World War and to create the United Nations. And we still need that cooperation to be strong and to be vibrant, so that the world would move forward. Okay? So these two countries are important. And if they are able to develop a clear foreign policy of tolerance and international cooperation with other nations, the world will be the better for it. Now, in Russia itself, apart from China, we don't know how that is going to take shape, because Russia, like I said, is a very conservative country. And of course, you need, because it's a very big country, it will need a reform process within itself, and it's very dangerous to take the viewpoint of some Western nations that believe that they should create conflict within Russia. Nobody wants conflict within Russia, because the stability of Russia is very important to the stability of the world. Okay, we know what happened when the Soviet Union fell apart. There was genocide here and there. So we want Russia to be stable, just as China is stable. But we want a reform process to take place where they engage more with other nations. Okay? So number 3, the most vital area of cooperation will be in vaccine development and in space. Okay, we've seen that happen when the Wuhan virus came out, and of course we know what happened when there was no cooperation. Okay, massive deaths. And of course this will be very, very important. I'm going to talk again about the space race later on, but this is an area where Russia and America are already partnering in, and it will really help if this partnership does not stop or does not degenerate into a conflict. Okay, so it is so important. And number 4, we go back there to Africa. African countries must begin a quick process of genuine unification and begin an international dialogue for African cultural and religious information gathering. This will be with the eye of hastening African Renaissance, the African Renaissance process, and avoid time wasting which causes Africans to lag behind. Africa is the last hub of the dominance of religion and culture. Okay, and I believe that at this stage the Africans are educated enough, okay, to know the level they are developmentally and to know where to go next. But we seem to always be dilly-dallying around some kind of lost for our past. Okay, I think we should come out of that stage where we lost for our past and we look into the future and say, okay, these things are already there. There are great people who have written books, but the mistake that some of those authors have done is that they have instead, kind of reneged in telling Africans the truth. Okay, they have created a lost for a possibility that may not be practical, in my view. And I believe that we should grow from this, okay, and we should instead create a United Nations within ourselves. And this United Nations of Africa, or United States of Africa, should be able to now begin a process of integration and a process of development in the way we know we are already moving towards. Okay, and I believe that this is very important, and this will stop Africa dragging people behind. A guy did a video and he said, look, of course I don't agree with what he says, but he made a point. Every little strange thing comes out of Africa, and kinds of goes viral. There are so many, because Africa is known as the continent for mystical things. We believe so much in mystics, and that is the problem. We don't know that every other continent has gone through this process. Okay, in fact, you cannot be more mystical than the Indians. You cannot be more mystical than the Chinese, but they have come through that and they know where they should be heading next. And I believe that Africa should do this also. We should move forward in education. We should move forward in civil leadership and begin to also contribute more organized, as a more organized setup towards technological development and all these other areas. More after this. Alright. After talking about Africa, we can talk so much and so much about Africa. It is a burden, my burden, because I believe I've seen a generation of Africans who really want to engage the world and really want to progress. But there's some of that nostalgia that seems to come, comes and charades itself as some kind of positive desire for African emancipation, but really does not have what it takes to take Africa to where it should be. And so I'm concerned about this, and I believe that African leaders should come together and tell themselves the truth. We must move forward. We must stop pulling the world back. because they are having their own struggles. Okay, the West is having their own struggles. They are wondering, okay, if this civilization is not working, why not let's try something different? But if we tell them that we have the solutions and we don't have it, it's going to cause a lot of problems, and it is already causing a lot of problems. So we must bring our best and our brightest together and say, look, where are we really going to go? Okay, it is important. Okay, number 5, a quick and efficient process should be put in place for Middle Eastern and Israeli peace through the Abraham Accords, but on a larger scale bring peace to all Arab nations and stable government to these nations. This includes the Asia Pacific. Okay, there's an urgent need for peace in Arabia, peace in the Middle East. Okay, peace between them and Israel. It is so important. Anytime peace wants to come, something comes up and disrupts that peace. There must be, in case there is any detail that is left out that creates some of these insurgencies, I believe that it's important to focus on peace in the Middle East, because peace in the Middle East affects everywhere in the world. It is that region that affects every part of the world, and we must solve this problem between the Arabs themselves and between Arabs and Israel. It is so important. Number 6, the United Nations should be reorganized to facilitate and project these new realities. If these realities are seen as possible, then the United Nations must be able to picture this, must be able to do this. Okay, and this is very important, because it is the United Nations that has helped in the process from the Second World War to date, and I believe that it can still be that platform if reorganized, if repurposed, to fit this new agenda. Number 7, in all these things I have mentioned, the space colonization and climate change will be a priority of cooperation. Of course, space colonization is closely related to the climate issues, and of course in harnessing space technology, we'll be able to solve a lot of climate issues. Of course, there are films that we made about that, not necessarily that, like a geostorm, of course, but of course that is an idea that is already ripe, and we must continue to look at this as a solution. Okay, because the future of humanity is in space, no doubt about it. Okay, population wise, technology wise. Okay, the future is in space, and to stop countries from fighting one another, we must bring them under cooperation to talk about space, to talk about climate change. And of course, politicians don't like things that don't bring profit. That is one thing we must understand, and that is why it is not really selling right now, because politicians by their nature want profit. They go and say they want to serve us, but actually they want profit. They want to do things that people will see now and here and now. But space is not like that. But it is time to begin to push them towards that direction. Okay, how much does it cost for each nation to put into their budget for space race? It's not even up to what they put for security. Okay, so they should do this, and so that we can now have a glimpse into the next frontier. Finally, I will talk about the next topic after this. I would like to round up this video by talking about the negative role of media and an uncontrolled mass. Okay, through impatience about getting things done. The masses are normally, okay, the bulk of humanity. Okay, apart from the 1% that owns a lot of the riches of the world, okay, and the governments of the world, the masses are the bulk, and the masses control the rumor mill. Okay, and the media is at the head of the rumor mill. The media now brings all these things together and tries to give us the facts. Now this is a lot of power, whether we like it or not, and I have discovered that the media has a very important role, and sometimes it plays a negative role. And we must be able to look at this. We must be able, if we want world peace, if we want human rights to be ensured all over the world, if we want humanity to move to the next stage, we must have the right leaders leading in media. We must have the right leaders talking to the masses, okay? Ensuring that there is education for all, ensuring that the masses have the right idea and agenda as to population, as to how we can solve the problems of the world. One impatient person or one impatient group can send us back, and there's a lot of impatience. Okay, what can we do now to get money? What can we do now to emancipate these people or that set of people? And a lot of it is driven not even for that, but for the sake of profit. We must look at that. Media for profit, religion for profit, masses for profit. We must solve that problem. I am David Unjichinke for you today in Searching the Heart.
It's a long, long way back home. It's a dry and rusty patch to where I belong. I hear you calling, my heart is breaking. I hear your voice, you're saying come home, come home. I hear the trumpets, my heart rejoicing. I hear your voice, you're saying come home, come home. I hear you calling, my heart is breaking.
Discover a transformative journey into the kingdom of heaven. Following the initial publication, the author dives deeper with two insightful follow-up books. Ever felt disconnected from God even in worship? Explore how God's unconventional ways can transform your life. How can you align with divine plans, avoiding distractions? Find answers in The Kingdom of Heaven on Earth and The 3, Illuminating Christian Truths and Prophetic Practices. Unlock profound insights guiding you toward a deeper connection with God. Don't miss out. Dive into this enlightening exploration today. Click the link on the caption to get your copy.